It was a cold morning in the fall of 1901. Andrew Carnegie was sitting in his 64-room mansion on New York's Fifth Avenue, one that would be worth about $45 million today. And the man was worth over $300 billion, which he built from scratch by dominating the steel industry. His factories roared with life, his bank accounts overflowed, but he had an emptiness that he couldn't shake. For years, he kept saying, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." But one has to wonder where exactly this was coming from. His mind flashed back to the lives lost in the brutal Homestead Strike, the crushed unions, and the workers who literally bled for his profits. And so, with a trembling hand, he picked up a pen, and with a single stroke, he began the process of writing away all his wealth. To libraries, to universities, to charities, and to foundations. But was this truly a redemption arc? Or a billionaire's attempt to simply rewrite history? Was Carnegie the world's greatest philanthropist? Or was his generosity a smokescreen for a darker past? Let's get to the obvious question first. How does one even get to $300 billion from nothing? You see, how he grew up would have an immense impact on his life and his view of how the world worked. Wealth was not his birthright. Poverty was his reality instead. Andrew Carnegie's journey started in a small home in Scotland where survival was a daily battle. He was born in Dunfermline in November 25, 1985. It was an insignificant town with very few opportunities, but his parents tried to make do. His parents relied on weaving and sewing just to get by. Eventually, power looms came and destroyed their trade and made them jobless. But this hardship was not just a financial blow, it was a very important life lesson that young Andrew Carnegie just could not forget. The Carnegies took a leap of faith. They could stay in Scotland and struggle, or move to America for a chance at a better life. The decision was made and they arrived in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. The town was home to a tight-knit Scottish community, but without any money or connections, life wasn't going to be easy here either. Those early struggles shaped Carnegie's mindset. He learned that survival meant adaptation. He learned that industries can rise and fall, but you could always adapt and start anew. Those lessons stayed with him. He was eager to help out his parents. At just 12 years old, Andrew Carnegie entered the workforce as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory. It was grueling work, long hours, low pay, and very little rest. But young Carnegie had a strong desire to build a better future. Even when he was not working, he spent every moment he could spare reading, writing, and attending night school. He knew that education would be his escape from poverty. By age 14, Carnegie landed a job as a telegraph messenger. It was definitely a step up from the factory floor, but more importantly, it put him at the right place at the right time. You see, Carnegie's sharp mind and relentless work ethic didn't go unnoticed. In 1853, Thomas Scott, who was a superintendent of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, saw potential in the young messenger. He hired him as his private secretary and telegrapher. That role was Carnegie's springboard into greater success. In just 5 years, he took over Scott's position as superintendent. It would be here that Carnegie would discover his greatest opportunity at one of America's lowest moments. You see, the Civil War had just started. Carnegie's job at the Pennsylvania Railroad granted him a unique view of the battlefront's demands. The relentless battles fueled a massive hunger for iron, and he recognized that every shot fired needed more metal. By the way, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. Anyway, as I was saying, after the war ended, Carnegie acted decisively. He redirected his energy from railroads and telegraphs to the ironworks sector. He founded the Keystone Bridge Works. It was a move that set the stage for his eventual steel empire. His strategic investments paid off pretty handsomely, with dividends soaring in 1863. And then, in 1865, the Keystone Bridge Company started making very good profits. It was the beginning of his ascent to an industry tycoon. But all this success owed a lot to his years in the railroad industry. It taught Carnegie the inner workings of logistics and infrastructure, elements that required steel, lots and lots of steel. As American railways saw rapid growth, he saw a chance to turn knowledge into power by using a solid network to secure major contracts. Success after success fueled greater ambition. He poured money into iron bridges and rail investments, and every step brought him closer to something massive. And he had done all of this while he was in his 30s. A child who grew up in poverty now had more money than he could ever have imagined. His annual income soared to $50,000, which is a fortune in those days. It was equivalent to $1.2 million today. Now, it wasn't just his connections and network that set him apart. What also favored him was that he always kept tabs on what was happening in the industry to catch wind of any new opportunity. I mean, you could say that it was an early form of market analytics, which has now become standard across the business world. And through this, he caught wind of a civil engineer, James Buchanan Eads, and his plan to build an impressive bridge over the Mississippi in St. Louis. Now, Carnegie knew that this was his chance. He was determined that Keystone would win that contract. Not only would the project put Keystone in the spotlight, but it would also open the door to larger contracts down the line. Now, to do this, he had to sell bonds to fund the construction, which would actually line his pockets with a very tidy profit. But there was one problem. Eads did not like Carnegie. He saw Carnegie as a businessman, not a builder, a man who cared more about profits than engineering. And understandably, tensions ran high between the two. Delays piled up, costs soared, there were a lot of problems, but despite the friction, they both wanted to get the job done, and the bridge finally took shape. When it finally stood tall, Carnegie admired it with pride. It was his first real taste of what steel could do, and he wanted more. The Eads Bridge had also been Carnegie's first real encounter with structural steel. He saw how it could bend without breaking, withstand immense weight, and last for generations. It would be a pivotal moment that would transform the steel industry. Literally, the bridge defied doubts and set a new standard. It linked Carnegie to a vision. He saw steel's strength and potential to reshape entire cities. It was clear that the future belonged to steel, and Carnegie was ready to claim it. In the wake of that inspiration, Carnegie began searching for a method to mass-produce steel. With his bank account booming, Carnegie was ready to chase bigger dreams. By 1872, Andrew Carnegie shifted his focus entirely to steel. At only 38 years of age, he founded the J. Edgar Thomson Steel Works near Pittsburgh, and it was no small operation. It was the foundation of what would eventually become the Carnegie Steel Company. But while Carnegie's dreams were vast, he understood that every visionary needed trusted allies. That's why he partnered with Henry Clay Frick, a sharp administrator with toughest nails reputation. Captain Bill Jones, who was a steel master and inventor, joined the teams to revolutionize production methods. And Carnegie's own brother, Thomas M. Carnegie, also stood by his side to ensure that every operation ran smoothly. And soon enough, he also met an English inventor by the name of Henry Bessemer. He shared with Carnegie a revolutionary idea, the Bessemer process. The process involved blowing air through molten iron to remove impurities. This quick purification lowered costs dramatically. It also made steel faster and, of course, more cheaper to produce. No more brittle iron, no more inefficiencies, just hard steel, strong enough to build monuments with and shape America. Carnegie wasted no time. He built massive steel plants, scaled production, and outpaced competitors. Look, innovation was the engine of Carnegie's strategy, and the Bessemer process proved it. That breakthrough also reminded Carnegie about his tough upbringing when economic shifts happen. He realized that every economic swing held a chance to gain the upper hand, but only if you were on the right side of it. With that clarity in mind, Carnegie's business plan was plain and simple. During boom years, he stockpiled cash, not for luxury, but for leverage. And when the downturns hit, steel prices dropped, businesses folded, and assets went on sale. And that's when Carnegie pounced. He bought mills at rock-bottom prices, and then he upgraded their technologies, cut costs, and streamlined productions. Every tiny savings in production translated to massive profits over time. And it worked for him, big time. But Carnegie didn't stop there. Carnegie Steel went further by controlling every link in the chain. He bought iron mines and secured raw materials. He purchased coal fields to fuel his furnaces and acquired railroads and steamships to transport his steel. I mean, every step of the production had to be under his control. From mining to manufacturing to delivery, he owned it all. This was vertical integration, a strategy that slashed costs and maximized profits. No more dealing with price hikes from suppliers, no more delays. Everything moved efficiently and at a super low cost. This gave Carnegie a major advantage over his competitors. But controlling the supply chain was only half the battle. Carnegie wanted a total monopoly. Whenever a rival steel company struggled, he didn't wait for them to collapse. He just bought them out. And one by one, competitors disappeared as Carnegie Steel absorbed them into his growing empire. His strategy would be learned and copied by countless businessmen, which today we term as horizontal integration. It was this tactic that turned his company into an unstoppable force. By the 1890s, Carnegie Steel had dominated the industry. No one could match his prices, and no one could challenge his reach in the market. The steel empire was his. But Carnegie Steel's success came with a very dark chapter. You see, in 1892, trouble erupted at Carnegie Steel's Homestead mill. It all started with a dispute over wages. You see, the company had to cut pay, change the way that wage scale worked, and lower tonnage rate. These changes sparked an outrage amongst the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, which was one of the strongest labor unions of that time. So when negotiations failed, the workers took action. But it wasn't a quiet protest. Tensions boiled over, and the situation quickly escalated. You remember Henry Clay Frick, Carnegie's right-hand man that he hired? Well, he handled the crisis. But Frick was not known for compromise. He hired notorious strikebreaker guards from the Pinkerton agency to break the strike and take back control of the mill. But when the guards arrived, the scene turned violent. Shots were fired, blood was spilled, lives were lost. The situation spiraled until the workers took control of the mill. Desperately, Frick called a state militia to restore order. Once the soldiers arrived, the company resumed production, but this time without the 800 union workers who had once manned the mill. The violent confrontation left a lasting scar on Carnegie Steel's reputation. But despite the dark shadow of the Homestead Strike, Carnegie Steel still survived the following years. Under Henry Clay Frick's leadership, profits skyrocketed. What had been $4 million annually in 1892 surged to a staggering $40 million by 1900. That's about $1.5 billion today. But by this point, Carnegie's focus had shifted. His relationship with Frick strained, and he grew more detached from the day-to-day operations of the steel business. That's why he chose instead to spend most of his time in Scotland. By 1889, he was already thinking about selling off his empire. The right opportunity finally came in 1901. Financier J.P. Morgan was a titan in his own right, having made a fortune as one of Wall Street's top bankers. He agreed to Carnegie's $492 million offer. That's about $18.3 billion today. And with that deal, Carnegie Steel became the foundation for the newly formed United States Steel Corporation, the first truly billion-dollar company in history. By the way, I made a video about this and JP Morgan, so check it out right over here. This sale marked the end of Carnegie's steel reign, but set the stage for something far larger: his legacy as a philanthropist. At the height of his success, Andrew Carnegie was the richest man in the world. His steel empire had made him a fortune beyond imagination, but for Carnegie, wealth was apparently a responsibility. The sale that made Carnegie the richest man in the world and made his personal net worth over $380 million, that's about $309 billion in today's value, created some interesting thoughts in his mind. He had no interest in simply holding on to his fortune. He believed that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. So instead of keeping his wealth, he spent his later years giving it all away. He was determined to make a real difference in the world. His philosophy was clear. In 1889, he put his beliefs into words in an essay called The Gospel of Wealth. In it, he laid out his argument that the wealthy had the duty to give back, to use their money for the good of society rather than just holding it for personal gain. Even today, his words spark debate about the fine line between capitalism and social responsibility, and that's more than a century later. In The Gospel of Wealth, he made his stance clear. He said, and I quote, "Men who leave vast sums of money in this way may fairly be thought of men who would not have left it at all had they been able to take it with them." He believed that wealth is something to be used for the greater good. When Carnegie talked about the greater good, he was all in on education. He believed that education was the ultimate equalizer that could put anyone out of poverty and opened up many doors. That's why he invested in schools and universities, because he truly believed that if you get a good education, you get a better shot at life. Carnegie had once said that if any millionaire is at a loss of how to achieve great and indisputable good with his surplus, here's a field that can never be fully occupied. Besides donating his money to schools and universities, he built over 3,000 public libraries around the world. These were places where anyone could go in, pick up a book, and discover something new. It's one of his lasting legacies that still make an impact today. Now, Carnegie also believed that money should spark change. In 1911, he kicked off the Carnegie Corporation in New York. It was a bold move to spread knowledge and build understanding. What started as a simple idea quickly turned into one of his biggest philanthropic legacies. And then there's his hometown story. In 1903, he founded the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust to help improve life back where he started. Today, the trust even runs the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum. So this is a real-life reminder of where his journey began. And then there's something else that sets Carnegie apart. He channeled his wealth into causes that truly mattered to him. In 1910, he founded the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace to promote global cooperation through research and dialogue on international affairs. This organization continues to influence global policy discussions today. Carnegie's commitment to peace is also evident into his funding of the Peace Palace at The Hague. In 1903, he donated over $1 million to construct this iconic building, which now serves as a hub for international law and justice. And in 1905, he established the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. Initially, it served as a pension fund for college educators addressing their financial insecurities. But by 1918, the foundation gave rise to the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association, now known to provide retirement benefits to educators across the nation. And then in 1913, he founded the Carnegie United Kingdom Trust, a $10 million endowment fund. This trust aimed to enhance the well-being of the people in Great Britain and Ireland. In addition, it supports community services, the arts, and heritage projects. Today, it still shapes public policy and practice and makes a real difference in the communities of the UK and Ireland. Now, we talked a lot about the good stuff that he's done. Carnegie is often remembered as the rags to riches story, the steel magnate who gave away his fortune for a good cause. But let's not forget that he was also a ruthless business tycoon. Carnegie not only amassed wealth, he defended a system that kept millions trapped in extreme poverty. I mean, his steel empire ran on pretty brutal and horrific conditions. Starvation wages, endless work hours, you name it. When workers dared to fight for fair pay and safety policies, he rejected their demands. Even worse, he responded to them with violence. I mean, the Homestead Strike that I mentioned earlier is clear proof of this. The workers just demanded better conditions, and Carnegie was already very wealthy and his company was turning a huge profit. He could have easily afforded an increase in their wages, but instead, he hired brutal enforcers who were armed and ready to crush the movement, and as a result, several people actually lost their lives, all so that the profits could keep flowing. And yet, Carnegie called himself a man of the people. He boasted about his time working in a cotton factory as a child. He claimed that it made him a working man at heart. Now, critics call it hypocrisy. How could he celebrate unions while slashing wages, demanding 12-hour shifts, and doing everything in his power to keep organized labor weak? His defenders point to his libraries, his universities, and the grand institutions that bear his name. But his critics say that the wealth he donated should have gone to the very people who created it in the first place, the workers in the form of higher wages. Many call him a hypocrite for refusing to share wealth when they needed it the most, but only gave it away when he retired. He also saw labor unions as a threat. To him, they were obstacles to progress. He believed that wages should be dictated by the market and not by collective bargaining. But this ignored one simple truth: workers had no real power on their own. You see, when you're desperate, you're in no position to demand for fair compensation for your work. That's why collective bargaining is just so important. His anti-union stance exposed the hypocrisy of his gospel of wealth. He claimed that the rich had a duty to help society, but still, he fought against workers who were just trying to help themselves. Andrew Carnegie's life is a tale of contrasts: rags to riches, ambition to altruism, and power to philanthropy. He rose from the depths of poverty himself to build an empire that shaped modern America, but his journey was far from flawless. His ruthless business tactics, epitomized by the Homestead Strike, left a stain on his legacy, while his later years were marked by an unprecedented commitment to giving back. Carnegie's story forces us to grapple with difficult questions. Can immense wealth ever truly be separated from the exploitation that often creates it in the first place? Is philanthropy enough to redeem a legacy built on the backs of workers? In the end, Carnegie's life reminds us that progress comes at a cost, and true greatness is measured not just by what we build, but what we choose to leave behind. His legacy is a testament to the power of ambition, the complexity of human nature, and the enduring hope that even the most controversial figures can strive for redemption. So what do you think? Was Carnegie a visionary who used his wealth for the greater good? Or was he just a simple tycoon who sought to rewrite his own story? Now, if you've made it this far into the video, drop an upside down smiley emoji in the comments. Also, check out this video that I made about JP Morgan, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.